Intercontinental Champion of all time.
This is the moment I've been waiting for as I've fought and crawled my way to the top. The next World Wrestling Federation Intercontinental Champion right here.
Hell's gone, this one's underway. All the marbles at stake here.
Everybody here is thinking pink.
Both guys taking a lot of liberties here in this one. They know how much is at stake.
They're not laying back.
Hitman wide open on the apron. Right into the steel barricade.
Perfect will be in the showers in 10 minutes.
He's got him set up for it. Oh, no, no! No, he got down.
I can't believe it.
Nobody's ever kicked out of that. I have never seen a match go one way, then the other, back and forth so many times.
Oh, look at this. He's got it halfway on. The coach is up on the apron. And there goes the coach. Oh. Nice block there, that move.
Beautiful counter.
The sharpshooter.
He's got it.
He's got it. No. We got a new champion.
No.
Tears in the eyes of Mama Dad Hart. Oh, Intercontinental Champion Bret the Hitman Hart. And he deserves it. This place is going bananas.
This is the Pro Wrestling Spotlight, presented by Hami Media and the Pro Wrestling Reflection, where we discuss the very best of the best in pro wrestling history.
And what's it gonna do when Hulkamania and the largest arms in the world run wild on you?
The two soundest wrestlers in the World Wrestling Federation, maybe in the history of the World Wrestling Federation, are right here, right now. Mr. Perfect and the excellence of execution, the Hitman.
WrestleMania weekend isn't complete without the Heartbreak Kid, and he is on his way.
He put hard times on Dusty Rhodes and his family.
They think they got the answers. I change the question.
You will rest in peace.
Get used to it in Ric Flair. Who you're looking at, the man.
This man! But the Rock is
What is going on there, Reflection Nights? What is going on there to the Hami Nights? What is going on there to the PWCites? What is going on to the Big Vitoites? And all the ites all around the world, from coast to coast, border to border, city to city, from the USA to the Kremlin, from Zimbabwe to Wakanda, from Africa to Asia, from China to North Korea, South Korea, and all the Korean towns out there. But neither here nor there. What is going on to the Magnificent 7, the Elite 8, the Naughty 9, the Terrific 10? You know who you are. What's going on to new Reflection Nights and old Reflection Nights and all that spiel? Welcome to the PWR podcast here at the Hami Media Group at podbean.com. And this is a special one because this episode is another TW classic. Because if you listened last week, TW had some rumblings about something. He had a suggestion for the professor, and the professor said, wait a minute, can't do it live, because then Tien Couponer might say, oh, I got the videos for you. And shout outs to Tien Couponer, he tweeted out the videos just on the whims of TW saying something. That's how loyal the Reflection Nights are. So shout outs to Tien Couponer, but I needed to go into the labs and make sure we had something. We had some material to do this special episode, and it will be a Pro Wrestling Spotlight Greatest Rivalries edition. I don't know if we can call it Greatest Rivalries, but we will call it a Rivalries edition with Bret the Hitman Hart and Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig. But before we get into that, I must introduce myself because I am vain like that. I must introduce myself because I need to get younger and beautifuler and sweeter and sexier, all rolling into one. Because I don't want to have dementia, I don't want to have Alzheimer's, I don't want to have old age, but I'm already feeling it. I'm feeling it in my neck. I'm feeling it in my shoulders. That old age is kicking in. They say 40 is the new 20. I don't feel the 20s. I still feel the 40s. Fuck y'all 40 people. But anyway, I am the most charismatic one. I am the most scholarly one. I am the most effervescent one. But most importantly, I am the most glorious one. The only objective man in the IWC, YWC, PWC punditry. The only objective man in this political spectrum. Your friend of mine, the Professor Chabelle Cruz. And I'm not here alone. No. I might be in my fabulous 40s, but he is in his fortified 50s, give or take. He is your friend of mine, Dum Dum Do Idiot Song, Dr. Frankenstein, Mr. Wonderful, the Iron Stomach One, the man that redecorates his goddamn fucking basement every time I interview him, every time he hits the record button. Woo! Tommy Wonder, how you doing, my friend?
I was doing all right till you said in my 50s. Jeez, I'm a week and a half into 50, let alone 50s. You're not 40 yet?
I'm 46.
Oh, I thought you tried to just try to sneak in. You're 4 years away.
But when I introduce myself, I get younger. That's what I said. I keep getting older. It's just not working.
I don't know how you should get out of breath. You should feel older by the time you're done with all them adjectives you gave yourself.
I do. I really, really, really do. But anyway, how's the week going? How are the kids? How is feeling 50? Are you crinkling up? And he is holding up for the audio reflection nights the action figures of Bret the Hitman Hart and Mr.
Two
Kirk Henry.
of the 4 greatest Intercontinental Champions of all the times.
And Kofi Kingston's one, and The Miz is the other. Is that what you're trying to say too?
No, they didn't have the cool belt. They didn't have that belt or that belt. This 2 are perfect for Bret. The other 2 are Warrior and Kerry Von Erich. Those are the 4 best ever.
Kerry Von Erich, one of the greatest Intercontinental champions ever.
I didn't say the reign. I just mean he, the person, is.
Okay. I'm just making sure because everybody be like, what? TW, what? Kerry Von Erich? Okay. Neither here nor there. But it is a Rivalries edition. But again, I can't say it's the greatest Rivalries edition, TW. And that's just my humble opinion. Because we're going to talk about Bret the Hitman Hart and Mr. Perfect Kirk Hennig reflection nights. But I want to before we talk about the matches and all that stuff, but TW, I say it's not one of the greatest rivalries because every Rivalries edition we've ever done here on the PWR podcast, most of the rivalries has a backstory. Most of the rivalries has a continuing saga between the 2 combatants or maybe tag teams within that reputation. Now, for Bret the Hitman Hart and Mr. Perfect Kirk Hennig, there is a backstory to a degree reflection. Now, don't get me wrong. They're second-generation wrestlers. Stu Hart, Larry Dax Hennig. So you're continuing, that legacy kind of feud between families. So you can look at it from that standpoint. But in terms of our rivalries, TW, because again, like I keep saying, the chronologies of our rivalries editions, if you will, kind of are close together. This one is going to span, let's just say, almost a decade. Certain instances with these 2 combatants have prevalence. Certain instances between these 2 are very important time-wise. But what say you about it not being one of the greatest rivalries, but a great rivalry in itself?
I say it's the greatest because it's 2 of the best ever wrestle. And for me, I just actually sent the picture. I found it online. As a kid, I believe it was late 89 when Kurt Hennig came there. I was already a fan of his from AWA because of him and Scott Hall, him and Greg Gagne. I loved him as AWA World Champion. But when he first was coming there, you remember they would talk about people in the magazine before the vignettes would even start airing on Superstars or whatever. And Kurt Hennig probably has, if there's not a better one, I don't know. His vignettes introducing him to the WWE are almost as legendary as his career there, with the whole every week doing a different sport.
His hype vignettes were perfect. We could say that it was perfect because of what what he did in those vignettes, hitting the hole in one, hitting the home run with his eyes closed, hitting the jump shot, hitting the half court shot, whatever the case may be. Reflection, you know what he did. I'm not dismissing that. But again, with our history of doing a Rivalries edition,
right.
mostly the matches that I have you see, The chronology is there. The reputation for the rivalry is there.
Right.
These two, again, the legacy is part of the rivalry. But within WWE parameters and WCW parameters, is it really one of the greatest rivalries? That's all I'm saying. That's all.
It involved a title. It involved a winning streak. It involved what I was about to tell you, a magazine cover before he's even there. It says Mr. Perfect is gunning for Bret. And that made me think, holy shit, did these guys like fight as kids? Like, did their dads have to separate them in the back of the bingo hall? What's going on here? Like, it made me ready for Mr. Perfect to come there. Also made me know he's going to be a bad guy. He's picking on Bret. But it also made me nervous for Bret because I'm like, Kurt Hennig's no joke. So I like that he already had a feud before he even got there. And then the feud, that's 89. 93 was the King of the Ring. So in that span, and then obviously we're going to talk about a WCW match, but it did carry on. It wasn't something, but it also had heat. It had gentleman, sportsmanship at the end of one match. It's to me, it's at least for a brief moment in time, it was one of my favorite, first of all, matches ever, him and Bret at SummerSlam. But it's just to me, it's two of the best, and it's the best I've seen two of them with, not the best, but one of the best time periods in both of their careers for me was against each other.
I agree. The reputation precedes both of them. I'm not dismissing that. I'm just saying that, again, on our traditions of the rivalry.
I think what you're missing is a cage match. There wasn't a big blow-off cage match. So they were always, you know what? You're thinking of these two along the same lines as Ric Flair versus Rick Steamboat, where their feud lasted all of 4 months, right? But it was all done briefly, boom.
But that trilogy is still one of the greatest rivalries
Absolutely.
ever. So there is that one example. We could talk about like Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair. That spanned years too. But again, the heat was there. Like I keep saying, again, Bret Hart, and I'll say this: Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect. Like you remember how I'll say this: Chris Jericho said that when he saw WrestleMania 3, Steamboat and Savage at WrestleMania 3 steal the show, he knew that there's someone like him, his size, that can make it in professional wrestling because of Steamboat and Savage. Seeing these matches, you can see a Jericho, you can see a Lance Storm, you can see even Just Incredible, you can see TW say, because of Bret Hart and Kurt Hennig doing what they did in that ring, might have not been the main event, but it's one of the most memorable matches.
They stole the show.
And they stole the show. They're technically sound and all that. So you agree with that assessment?
Absolutely.
Put a bow on that, and then we'll.
I didn't even know Jericho said that about. I believe Jericho's using hindsight, revisionist history to make that statement because I was 12 when that match happened. So, matter of fact, I was 11 because I turned. No. I was 13. I would have turned 14 that year, but I was 13 years old, and I believe Jericho might be a year older than me. So I don't know that he was thinking someone his size was going to be a wrestler when he was 14 years old. But I know his sentiment. And basically you see Hogan, you see Andre, you see Warrior, you see Sid, you see Road Warriors, you see all these guys. And I think that's probably why a lot of us veered towards tag team wrestling, people that love it, right? Because tag teams were usually two smaller guys, and it wasn't Andre and Haku, it was Haku and Haku, right? And so you watch that and you just thought, I think I said this before on this podcast. Joe Rogan said it. When you watch boxing, when you watch MMA, and you don't know either guy, human nature is to cheer for the guy that looks most like you. And when we saw smaller wrestlers who weren't from the land of the giants, and if you had any aspirations of doing it, you're like, these are my guys. This. And by the way, I met Bret Hart right out of high school. I met him again years later in the business, but out of high school. And you think they're small. And me and my buddy Dennis Hogan, we waited at the Palace of Auburn Hills for where they come out the back in their cars. And Bret was the only person out of everybody that came out that came up to us and signed my buddy's memory book. It was raining, to be fair. But he came out, and I just remember just staring at him while he was signing my buddy's book. And I touched his forearm, and I go, dude, you're way bigger than I thought you were going to be. And he looked up and said, you're surprised? And I go, no, you're way bigger. And he goes, thanks. And he finished signing the book. But he looked small because he's in there with all those giants and everything. But he wasn't a small man by any stretch of the imagination.
Absolutely. Like I said, again, because of Bret Hart, because of Mr. Perfect, that spawned Shawn Michaels too. You could add those people, the technically sound guys. Even Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, they're small in stature too. But in the Rock and Roll Express, those small guys, you can make money. So they brought off a generation of people, including TW, including Los Rudos, and including Scott D'Amore, including Edge, including Christian, and all that stuff. So again, it spawned off a generation of wrestlers that can say, I can do this, I can be them, and I can make money. Maybe not say I can main event WrestleMania, but you knew you can make a living being that size.
A few years later, WrestleMania headliner you can add that to the list.
Absolutely. So with that being said, we are going to do this greatest rivalries. I guess TW kind of convinced me this is the greatest rivalry for a quandary of reasons. So I'll say it's the greatest rivalry. So we're going to start off in 1989, June of 1989. I think this was at the Boston Garden, TW. So it is Bret Hart against Curt Hennig. And this is where there's two factors going into this. Mr. Perfect is undefeated. Mr. Perfect hasn't eaten a pin. Nobody has touched him. He hasn't even kissed the mat. He hasn't looked at the lights and all that stuff because he was coming in hot, like you said, with all that hype vignettes. On the flip side, I think for Bret Hart in 1989, it was a test by Vince McMahon to see if he can carry a singles role because he was, dominating the tag team scenes with the Hart Foundation in the mid-'80s. He had the wars with the British Bulldogs. He had the wars with the Killer Bees, the Young Stallions, Demolition, all that stuff. We don't need to harp on that. But it was two factors. It was the test to see if Bret Hart can make money as a singles person, hang with Mr. Perfect, because Mr. Perfect was already coming with a lot of street cred. He was the former AWA World Heavyweight Champion. So in hindsight, you can look at it this way, TW. This should be not a cakewalk for Mr. Perfect to beat him in, let's say 10, 12 minutes. But he should beat him. That's what I'm saying. What say you, TW, about 1989? Let's not talk about 1991, 93, because, again, you'll get where I'm going with the reputation. I'm going to focus on 89 because both guys are in different stages of their wrestling careers.
Absolutely. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm sure if I am, you'll correct me, but their IC match isn't until SummerSlam of 91. I think SummerSlam 90, the Hart Foundation either won the belts or helped the Road Warriors win the belts.
No, they won the tag team. They won the tag team titles in 90.
So Bret went back into tag team because Bret and Jim Neidhart have the rare air of no one ever turned on the other guy. They just went their separate ways. The last time, obviously, Neidhart started teaming with Coco and then Owen later on, and it never really took off for Neidhart. He inevitably became the Marty Jannetty of the Hart Foundation. But you said it best. This is seeing what Bret can do. And I think that's another reason why when I saw that article and it said Mr. Perfect is gunning for Bret, it was kind of like, huh? Like, has he got a partner? Is he bringing Greg Gagne with him? Scott Hall coming? Who's coming with him? But it wasn't. It was just one-on-one, and I loved it. I mean, I'm glad you had me watch this match because I didn't know the outcome, and I watched all 20-something minutes of this motherfucker. But it was good. It was actually a good. If there was a test to see how these two could do, not only did they pass it with flying colors, that audience is engaged the entire time. And, when I was watching this match, when I was watching the SummerSlam match, all I thought was I would sacrifice a fucking goat if I could get wrestling audiences to be like that again. Because when there was a rest hold, they didn't chant boring. Rest holds weren't for long. It was probably to regroup and what we doing next and take a breath. But they got elevated when they needed to be elevated, relaxed, didn't try to steal the show when they were ready to relax. And I think by the end of this match, I think the audience is just as tired as Bret and Curt because it was a roller coaster ride, and the fans were with them for all of it.
When you look at this match from 1989, again, I have to go with the logistics here. Again, Mr. Perfect is coming in hot. Of course, these are house shows, so we kind of know that sometimes that history is not told. You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe Mr. Perfect took count out losses. Maybe Mr. Perfect lost by disqualifications. But again, it would never translate to Wrestling Challenge. It would never translate to Superstars. Right. So with this being said, Reflectionites, this June 1989 match from the Boston Garden is prevalent because somebody took Mr. Perfect to the limit. Bret Hart got a, you know, that cosmetic win, you could say, because
kiss your sister.
Kiss your sister? What the hell?
A draw, a tie. It's a kiss your sister.
I've never heard that, but
that's a hockey term. That's a hockey term. And I think Bobby Heenan used to say it. Nobody wants a tie. A tie is like kissing your sister.
I call it consolation. You call it kiss your sister. So tomato, tomato. But he hung with Mr. Perfect. They got the draw. So it was a cosmetic win for Bret Hart to a degree.
Right.
But what say you about again, you said this was a roller coaster. And think about it right now, TW, because in 1989, you know, Hogan and Savage was the hot feud for the WWF. Warrior and Rude was the hot feud. So you understand that for these house shows, this is the third on the low side, stealing the show with those two high-marked main events that you're going to see later on. So what say you about that kind of parameter there? This match is like hyping up the crowd, so this way you get excited for the main events that you actually paid your hard-earned money.
This is the epitome of when I first got in. I'm not tooting my own horn. I just know this is what was told to me. And you almost come in feeling like an afterthought when you're the first match. But then you get told by promoters, no. The first match is as important as the last match because the first match sets the pace for the rest of the show. If the first match comes out and lays an egg, it's going to be harder for the next match to get the fans into it and vice versa. And by the time you get to the main event, it's dead in the water. So the three main matches that have to be good, actually four, are the opener.
Oh, hold on. Reflectionites, I actually see the picture that TW shared with me. This is actually from WWF Magazine.
Yes.
So
yes.
This is not Pro Wrestling Illustrated because they wouldn't go with
I said WWF Magazine, damn it.
I'm just for the Reflectionites. So with that.
And that wasn't even with an article. That was just a picture on the back cover. And so I had no anything to go off of. But anyway, the four main matches on a wrestling show, especially WWE back then, because they always had that long intermission, are the opener, the last match before the intermission, the first match after the intermission, and the main event. A lot of times Hogan would be the match before intermission. So the last match had to be something stellar. And I'll tell you, a lot of house shows I went to, you know what that last match was? It was either the Hart Foundation, the Rockers, or the last match would be a tag team title match or something like that, or IC title match. But this match is probably first. It's the curtain jerker, and it sets the pace.
Or it could have been the first match after
intermission. Absolutely.
To get the crowd back into it.
But that means they have faith in you to get the motor running, basically, get the boat on the water. So, and they did not disappoint. And the other thing, I'm not certain, because a lot of times young Vince McMahon sounds different to me than like Vince McMahon. But I think it's Tony Schiavone and Lord Alfred Hayes on commentary.
Yeah, that was Tony Schiavone and Lord Alfred. Yeah.
For his 6-month stint in the WWE, he was there.
Yeah. Tony Schiavone, underrated, great WWF commentator, because he had his moments of grandeur, if you will, Reflectionites. So before we put a bow on this 1989 classic, TW, because as we progress to 91, and we'll talk about that, and we progress to 93 and progress to 98, their wrestling style didn't change. So they kind of knew each other's
spots didn't change either.
The spots didn't change. So what say you about the chemistry? And it's like Flair and Steamboat said, they fought each other 1,000 times. They can close their eyes and know the next move. Can you see that same kind of, I can close my eyes, tell you what I'm going to do, and you already know I'm going to do?
I would say those two for sure. I just watched an interview with Bret, a segment. I didn't watch the whole thing, but he's talking about John Cena. When he met John Cena, which, by the way, I didn't even know this even happened, but there's a 10-man match at SummerSlam with Bret and John Cena on a team.
Yeah.
CM Punk's on the other side, I think, or...
Yeah, Bret was wrestling in his jorts, but he wasn't really wrestling. I
don't even remember that match happening. So that would have been the year of Vince and Bret at WrestleMania, then same year?
It was like 2010.
Yeah. So he said in the back when they were going over everything, he was blown away by John Cena because they would go over their spots, and he goes, you can imagine how hard it is for 10 guys, to remember where to be and whatever to be. And he said when they were going over their spots, John Cena did what he always did, and he was shocked by it because he never worked with John before, and this is how Bret did it. So say they're setting up the match, and they do the open the spot, the mid spot, this, that, and they get to a point where one goes, all right, what am I doing here again? And then they go, okay, we're going back to the beginning. And the guys were like, God, I got the beginning. What are we doing here? And they're like, no, we're going back to the beginning. Because the mindset is, if you don't go back to the beginning and run it all the way through, then they're either going to remember the fuck up and then not know where to go from there or how to get to the fuck up. So he said that's how he did it. I would assume Kurt Hennig was the same way, that probably called everything in the back because his stuff was way too crisp, right? Like you hear all these old timers talk about calling it in the ring. You know when you call it in the ring? When it's your 4,000th match against Ricky Steamboat and your Ric Flair. You ain't doing that the first time. Because if you go out there, like I've had matches where I went out there and we called it in the ring. I have. But the guy I wrestled was someone I wrestled before. I knew all his shit. He knew all my shit. So we could just say, do this spot, do that spot. But if you're wrestling each other for the first time on some, like you've always heard the story of Bret and Davey Boy, how Bret had the thing rehearsed for 2 weeks and Davey Boy come in so high off his fucking ass, he didn't know he'd remember the spots. And he just listened to Bret, and Bret told him.
Again, let's remember this, TW, because Bret Hart from Stampede Wrestling, his father, Stu, meticulous, very technical, very methodical stuff that they did up in Canada. Mr. Perfect, Larry the Axe Hennig, but of course, from the learning tree of Vern Gagne and Minnesota. The AWA. Minnesota, technical pro wrestling. We're talking about Greco-Roman. So, again, being meticulous is the forte of the legacy sons here. So they have to be meticulous. They have to be technical on that standpoint. So
and just like with a guitar player or a bass player or a drummer, where you get into a room and riff people and you go hit that D chord. Well, the D chord for them is a tackle, drop down, leapfrog, hip toss, right? Like they have terms for shit that they've done in the past where they could just say A spot, B spot, C spot, whatever. So that, because it's hard to talk to each other in the ring if you don't have long ass hair. It's hard. Like you can probably watch Karrion Kross's hair is growing out. By the way, it's growing out because it's finally getting longer. It doesn't look like the Cena John Cena dad haircut. But when you got that hair hanging in your face, you can talk all day long because the hair is blocking it. And these guys got it. But yeah, these two for sure. I think for one, I think they're familiar with each other. For two, their paths had to have crossed as kids because of Larry the Axe and Vern and the Gagne family, the Hennig family, the Hart family. I'm sure Stu probably wrestled Larry the Axe either in Calgary or both Minnesota and Calgary. So absolutely, these two they have a Rolodex of shit in their head, and they know what's coming when the other guy's doing something.
The words are interwoven, interconnected, all that stuff. So
another language. Yeah,
it is another language, and a language you don't even have to say anything. You just look at each other and just know.
Language. Yeah.
It just works like that. Again, before we go to the next match, SummerSlam 91, I said this was a test for Bret the Hitman Hart. He passed with flying colors. Let me ask you this on let's just say for the casual viewer, TW. The ones with they always call it the eye test, right? For the tag team wrestler that Bret Hart is, when he was a good guy, he takes the brunt of the punishment.
Takes the heat.
He takes all that heat. So my question is, to educate the casual viewers here, the 12 that are ride or dies, but from a wrestler's perspective, how do you, I don't know how to say this right, but how do you get that casual viewer to push aside that you take all that heat, that you can take all this punishment and be a singles person? That's what I'm trying to say. Like Ricky Morton, could he be a singles guy? Yes, he could, but we know him as a tag team wrestler. Arn Anderson, can he be a singles guy? Yes, but again, we know us as a tag team. That how do you get that stigma like Bret Hart finally did or eventually did? What say ETW about that?
They talked about that. Whenever a solo guy or tag team guy went solo, they would say, dude, that was on primetime wrestling all the time. Like they would even say it if a tag team wrestler had a singles match. Like remember they had captains matches where. And they go, well, he's used to being able to tag out when he gets in trouble. That would be the heel, right? Or they would mention the babyface, like, oh, he can take a beating, but He usually tags out to the fresh man after he takes that beating and then comes back in when the adrenaline kicks in. But the flip side of that is the guy he's wrestling is also a tag team wrestler, so it's evened out. But when you're wrestling a guy who wasn't a tag team wrestler, they would almost always say that guy had the advantage because he doesn't need to tag out. He's winded for he's what do you call it? Trained or whatever. He's whatever. He's refined to singles action. He doesn't need a partner to tag in. But that's where rest holds come in. If a guy does a rest hold, they would the good savvy commentators that go, here he is. You can tell he's smart. He's learning it. He's taking a little rest by, applying a chin lock or something like that, and then getting his bearings and then going back to it. But it was definitely something talked about when a guy went singles after being in a tag team match, and Bret still took that heat, right? Because even singles matches, the babyface takes the heat in the middle of the match, but he did it, but he come back. And that's what they would always say is like he persevered, he took a beating and came back for more and then prevailed in the end. Or he came up just short because, maybe if he had a partner to tag in, it would have been different, but he's learning, stuff like that. But time is what gets people invested in you. Or if you don't mention it at all, the casual fan might not even know he is a tag team wrestler and they won't think anything of it.
Well, we know it because we're very hardcore to it. That's why I just had to ask that question. Yep. And let's put a bow on this because in this 1989 match ended in a draw. And the one thing I have to say, TW, again, between WWF and NWA, the only thing that NWA beats WWF is with time limit draws, because NWA matches, the ring announcer told you there's 5 minutes, there's 3 minutes, there's 2 minutes, 90 seconds, 10, 9, all that stuff. WWF never did that. And sometimes you just forget, you're just watching a match, you're loving it, and like this match, you're loving it. And when you hear the ding, 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 you're kind of pissed. Are you right with that? Did you like it? Or, what say you, TW? And then
I was actually pleasantly surprised because I actually watched the majority of it thinking Bret lost. And because I'm like, there's no way he's beating the undefeated guy on a house show. It's just not going to happen unless, a lot of times, when I would go to house shows at Joe Louis Arena, we would look for a camera. And if you saw a camera, you're like, whoa, something's happening here, right? Like, because there wasn't always cameras. You look for that red light. And a lot of times it ended up being, they just played it on primetime wrestling. Like live from Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, it would just be a random match. But when you saw a camera, you thought it was a possibility. And it's funny because you still don't believe wrestling's not real, right? But there's no chance a title's changing hands at a non-televised event. And then Bret won one at a non-televised event. He won the world title, which was very rare back then. To win it, Tito, I think, lost the IC title at the Boston Garden to Macho Man. That wasn't televised. It was a house show. So you do have it every now and again.
I would have to disagree. It was televised for that market.
Right.
It just wasn't televised for the nation.
Or Boston Garden Network. But, I know that. Nesson or whatever.
Yeah. So it does matter. But I get where you're going with it. But it is kind of televised. And they use those footages when it's important for superstars and wrestling channels. But neither here nor there.
Right. So that's what I mean. That's why you look for the camera light. Because you're like, they're going to fucking film this and put it on. Because you didn't have all the props and shit to let you know it was superstars. Or I never ever went to a WWF TV taping. I swear they were always in Albany, New York. That's the only place they ever went. But then they would do, whatever the occasion. And I thought they were all happening in the daytime while I was watching it. And I'm like, damn, these motherfuckers are wrestling at 11 in the morning? That's nuts.
Hell no. But anyway, we digress, Reflection Night. So we're going to move on to 1991, SummerSlam 1991 from Madison Square Garden. And this was one of the highlighted, matches on the card. For the Intercontinental Championship, Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig defending his title against Bret the Hitman Hart. And TW, we have to at least talk about the logistics because Mr. Perfect was coming into this match with an injured back.
Yep.
We knew that his time was very short, especially because, again, maybe Vince McMahon wanted to have a plan to have quote unquote the feud we're talking about, the rivalry, like a legit rivalry for this Intercontinental title. You and I would know that the chemistry that these two had They could have carried this from SummerSlam 91 to maybe WrestleMania 92. Again, that's just me hindsighting it. But we know that he's coming in with a bad back. He's going to be injured. He's going to be sidelined. So with that variable, and then there's the other variable now. Now this is the second test, if you will, for Bret the Hitman Hart, because Mr. Perfect from 1990 to 1991 was the two-time Intercontinental Champion. There was no doubt that he could carry the B shows, if you will. There's no doubt that he could be the last match on the card for the house shows with the Intercontinental title on the line. He was the Workman's Champion. He took on all comers. The reputation is there. But now the test is Bret Hart. He's not a tag team wrestler anymore because, again, with Jim Neidhart's injuries or maybe the cocaine, whatever the case may be, he had to entrust Bret Hart for this TW. Can he have a title? Can he carry the load like Mr. Perfect can? So what say you with all that variables for this match in 1991?
Kurt won the tournament after Warrior vacated the belt, right? That's how he got the title. And then he lost it to Kerry, then won it back like a month later or 2 months later, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And then there's actually one part in this match where Kurt grabs his back. And that's when you're like, uh-oh. And I think what you're saying, I think we knew it as fans that he had a bad back. Like it was in the wrestling newsletters or shit like that. Like, it was,
I had for the New York area the Slammer, so they would say that he's
there was a buzz injured about Kurt Hennig's back, and I think they talked about it leading up to the match on there, but like if he was gonna sell it like that, he would have sold it the whole match, and there was only one point where he grabbed his back, like damn, I'm like he ain't getting back up, like you could tell he was in pain. Same with Shawn. If you watch the match with Austin back, you can see him wincing for the majority of that match with his back. And so I believe, again, this is 30 plus years ago, 30 years ago, whatever. I believe I remember watching the match and just thinking, good Lord, like feeling horrible for the guy, right? Because I was a Perfect fan from day one, right? Like Perfect, Rude, Razor Ramon, Macho Man, and Rick Martel as the model. Those guys were always like my top 5 guys when they were the heel versions of them. And obviously I was a Bret guy. I loved Bret even when he was with Neidhart. Like I feel shame not saying the Hart Foundation are one of my favorite tag teams, but it is the Rockers and Tully and Arn. But hey, Bret,
everybody is subjective with their list and likes, so you're not wrong.
But it's no offense, God rest his soul, Mr. Neidhart, wherever you guys got to figure somewhere. It's just Neidhart. I wasn't a Neidhart guy, right? I like Tully and Arn. I like Shawn and Marty. I loved Bret. I didn't necessarily like Neidhart, and so I think if Owen and Bret would have been a tag team, it'd probably be up there with those other 2 teams. But that never happened. So, but these two. And that was the other thing I thought was, wow, if he knew he was going out, he went out with a bang. Kurt Hennig held nothing back in this match. He did that bump where he grabs the rope and gets kicked in the back of the leg and does the flip and lands on his shoulder. Never landed good on it. It's probably led to his back problems were those spots, and then pinball machine spots that he did. Same with Shawn. You bounce around like that all day, you're going to hurt something in your back, and he did. And it was almost sad to watch him in pain like that, but it was still, again, one of the greatest matches of all time.
Going into this match, TW, again, it has a different kind of feeling, if you will, because Mr. Perfect wasn't being accompanied by Bobby the Brain Heenan because Bobby the Brain Heenan was taking a step back because, his travel issues too, his health. He couldn't do the rigors of traveling 300 days out of the year like he used to. So they brought in the coach. So I think to me, the match is great. Don't get me wrong. But the ambiance of the coach, it wasn't Bobby the Brain Heenan. So it just felt a little bit off to me. That's just my humble opinion. Again, I'm not taking anything away from the match. I'm taking the ambiance away from it with the coach. I think it was kind of like, I don't know, maybe if you had Harvey Whippleman or maybe you had Slick, maybe I would say, okay, they did a trade, or even Mr. Fuji. if you traded Mr. Perfect's contract or Jimmy Hart, if Jimmy Hart was managing,
Jimmy would have been the only suitable replacement for me.
Right.
Bobby Heenan and Kurt Hennig worked together. They were perfect. Anybody else, I get it. You bring coach in like he was your high school coach because you did all the sports and everything, but he was annoying and he had that damn whistle and it wasn't good. What was his name? Not Lothario. That was Sean's guy. Jonathan something or
I forgot the coach's name, but you don't have to look for it. It's a misnomer. That's how bad it was to me with that.
But he was a big deal in the Bruno era as a wrestler, and then he came back as that coach wrestling guy.
Right, but it just didn't mesh with the professor. Again, you and I are right. It should have been Jimmy Hart that should have got the contract of Mr. Perfect, and he could have managed him and whatever that case may be. But again, got to talk about Bret Hart because now this is the second test. He will eventually win, and the way he won, because again, like you said, Mr. Perfect didn't hold back. He wanted to make Bret the Hitman Hart look like $1 million, and no doubt about it, he looked like $1 million, especially the way he won. If you want to talk about how he won his Intercontinental title,
not only how he won, but after he won, they do a little bit more on Kurt's way out of the ring. Like it's almost like he just made Bret look like he slayed the dragon. And you know what's funny is so they do a spot where they both land on their backs, and Bret from his back locks the sharpshooter and then rolls over and stands up, and Kurt submits immediately, like before he even pulls back. Like he just like, no, I can't go no more. It almost looks like Montreal Screwjob because I'm like, did Kurt even submit? But he's shaking his head like that the second Bret sits up, and probably because he was in unbearable pain and didn't want him to retch back on it. But after that, Bret's laying there grateful, like spent. He's selling like it took everything he had to beat Kurt. He's returning the respect, right? And then Kurt bonks him in the head, walking over him and says, "Get me." And Bret ripped his singlet off and booted him out of the ring in his underwear. Like, that was his last hurrah. He was gone until he came back to commentate because I think he had a surgery, right?
Yeah, he had back surgery. And, well, I don't know if it was surgery because he was back on TV very quickly with Ric Flair.
Right.
So he probably had surgery, was out for, rehabbing a couple of weeks. Then he was Ric
That was
Flair's
his last
executive.
match, I'm saying.
That was his last match. Yeah, that was his last match until 1993. And
but you ready for this, though?
What?
Bobby Heenan is on commentary.
With
Gorilla Monsoon and Macho Man. No, Macho
Piper.
Man was on the King of the Ring.
No, it was Gorilla, Piper, and Heenan.
Piper. Gorilla, Piper, Bobby.
Don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say it.
Morella.
Don't say it.
And the coach, Stu, and Martha Hart, or Mary Hart, whatever, Helen Hart. All dead. All dead.
Christ, I knew you. That's what I just said. Don't say it.
Bret's the literal last man standing in this match.
See, reflection. That's all. He's the gatekeeper. I don't know why he wants to keep track of the dead.
I don't want to keep track. It's like every time I'm like dead.
Jesus Christ. Let's put a little bit of a happy spin on it. And again, like you said, I wish I was there. I was there for 1988 SummerSlam, but I wasn't there for 91. I watched it on pay-per-view at home. But if I was there, I would have been cheering my ass off for that moment. The funny thing about this match, Reflection, is not what he did to Perfect. It's about Lord Alfred Hayes, what he did to Stu Hart. Because Lord Alfred Hayes at that time, Reflection, and this is just a misnomer. You don't have to really, if you really notice it, Lord Alfred Hayes went into heel mode in the 90s. Like, he didn't give a fuck. He almost had like a no filter. Like, I don't care now. These good guys really get on my nerves. And Stu Hart, he was like, "What do you feel?" Then takes the mic away, takes the microphone away. Like, that's right. He's a lost for. And Stu Hart's like, I know.
He said tremendous. He said, "How do you feel?" He goes, "Tremendous." And he goes, there you have it. That's the first. I'm like, damn. He snatched that mic away fast.
And Stu's looking like, I got more words to say. But then when Bret Hart comes, of course, they do the hug and all that stuff. But it was a great moment. I just wanted to point that out. For that purpose of this. Let's put a bow on this because you talked about how Bret Hart won. Because again, there was a debate in the 90s between Bret Hart's sharpshooter and Sting's Scorpion Deathlock. And of course, you and I know that if you're in the cafeterias And if you were wrestling fans, of course, we were watching both. We would have our debates of who's the master of. I usually had the Bret Hart. I was like, Bret Hart's the master of this move.
100%.
Well, and I was like, did you see SummerSlam 91? He did it on his back.
Yeah.
Tell me when Sting could barely do it when he's sitting up to do the move right.
Right.
Bret Hart can do the sharpshooter, scorpion deathlock, whatever you want to call it, TW, 1,000 different. He's the man of 1,000 different ways to do the sharpshooter. Right. What say you, TW?
But
about that?
Not only that, like as you're asking that question, which I did not see coming, Reflectionites, all 8 of you. There are iconic pictures of Bret Hart cinched in on the sharpshooter. There's one of him with Austin behind him. Like the pictures of Bret and Austin's in the back bleeding out, where it looks like Jesus couldn't get out of this sharpshooter, right? And there's one with Perfect. There's one with Flair. There's probably one with Owen, which there was one with him and Hogan in it. But when Sting put someone in the sharpshooter, it was almost like as soon as he flipped them over, they tapped out. And Sting was always standing. Bret looked like he was sitting on your back or taking a shit. One or the other. That was his body positioning, was a full-on sit. And Sting never looked like that. Sting always looked like he half-assed it. I actually like the Scorpion Death Drop over the Scorpion Death Lock because Sting's Scorpion Death Drop would come out of nowhere and he actually looked like he gave a fuck. But I think possibly Sting being taller, maybe he thought he was going to fall over if he tried going back too far. But Bret's sharpshooter makes the guy in it look like a lazy boy chair. Like he literally looks like he's holding his entire weight. Also, by the way, he's bent backwards the wrong way. And it was phenomenal. Absolutely. It's Bret, and it's not even close. And I got Sting tattooed on my damn arm, dude. So this is unbiased.
But there was debates about who did it better.
I'm sure. Yeah, those debates would be the same. Someone right now would tell you the 70 wrestlers in AEW that do the Diamond Cutter do it better than Randy Orton does the RKO. They could, just because they're AWA fans and vice versa. But we all know Diamond Dallas Page will tell you himself the greatest Diamond Cutter RKO of all times is Randy Orton. It's not close.
Okay. That's what makes it fun to debate with wrestling fans.
Who's the greatest pile driver ever?
Paul Orndorff.
That's easy. It's not even a question. And Bret's done the pile driver. Perfect's done the pile driver.
Jerry Lawler's done the pile driver.
His is the worst. It looks like he's sitting down to take a shit.
No, I'm just saying, but
it's Paul Orndorff's, and it's not close. He jumped up in the air, and you thought that dude was dying when they landed, and he never did. He never hurt nobody with it, as far as I know. But it was a thing of beauty.
Maybe that will be a spotlight in the future. Reflectionites, greatest. Who did the move sets the greatest? But again, we'll move on to the next match of this greatest rivalries edition between Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect. Now we go to 1993 TW. King of the Ring, the inaugural King of the Ring. Technically, King of the Rings happened in the 80s, but this is the first one that was on pay-per-view itself. And this is a no-brainer, TW. King of the Ring 93 is the best King of the Ring of all time because of the way they set it up, the participants in there, and of course, Bret Hart was the overall MVP who went the longest.
Is there a better list of guys that you beat on the way to winning the King of the Ring than Bret?
Yeah.
Didn't he beat Owen in the first? Jarrett or somebody?
No, he beat Razor.
That was first round?
Yeah.
So it was Razor, Perfect, Bigelow?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There was a fourth person. I forgot the fourth, but
that's what I said. I thought there was a fourth guy.
Yeah. But there's
someone in between Razor and Perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
But with that being said, TW, we look at that variable in two ways here because now both of them have a reputation. You know what I mean? Bret Hart has a reputation for being, a great workhorse champion. And of course, he was a world heavyweight champion that Mr. Perfect never got that opportunity. Mr. Perfect had the itch, you could say, to come back. He felt like he could, contribute in the ring. I guess, of course, he didn't feel like his contributions on the mic, even though I kind of, dug his commentary skills, if you will. TW, did you feel like something was missed with him as the perfect commentator, or you really missed him being the competitor?
He only beat 3 guys. He beat Razor, Perfect, and Bigelow. Oh, okay. And he also won the 1991 King of the Ring, but it wasn't the pay-per-view version.
It wasn't televised. But with that being said, Mr. Perfect had the itch to come back into the ring. So this was a great, field for him to do what he did. He won his first round match. So this was the semifinal round or the quarterfinals. I forget what it was. Neither here nor there. I think the quarterfinals here, like the first round was like 15 minutes. I think this one went up to 20 minutes.
30.
Oh, this was 30?
Yeah.
This was 30? So with that being
60.
said, Reflection Nights, the variables are all there. So now, TW, I say, there's a test here again. Bret Hart was given the opportunity to be the heavyweight champion. But maybe Vince McMahon said, I don't know if the fans believe that he could be the world heavyweight champion. So this King of the Ring
was more accolade
for Bret Hart, but more of a proving ground for the fans to say Bret Hart can be the guy that carried the torch for the World Wrestling Federation in the 90s. What say you about that?
Is 93 when Yokozuna lost it to Hogan?
Yeah, at WrestleMania.
So then 94 is when Bret and Luger co-won the Royal Rumble. So yeah, so he had a 1 year redo to get back up there, and
Yoko won the world title from Hogan at King of the Ring 93. So his era was starting. So, but again, this was the test. This was another benchmark test for Bret Hart to at least prove to Vince that he can sell out the arenas, that he can draw the houses, that he can make the buy rates for the pay-per-views. So with this kind of ambiance setting with the King of the Ring and the people he beat and what he did, I think he passed with flying colors. So what say you about this match in itself? And again, looking at this from this parameter here, Mr. Perfect was out of action for a year and a half, close to 2 years, you could say. So he hasn't been in the ring, with taking the rigors, if you will, of being on the road a lot. So now he's coming in he's coming in fresh, but he's coming in, I don't want to say green, TW, but again, the timing might not be there.
Wasn't it Survivor Series 92 that he came back with Macho Man?
He came back, but it wasn't as full-time, if you will.
Right.
That's what it was.
He was in that match only.
But that itch was there to come in 92, and then he did his thing against Flair in 93, but he wasn't in that full-time
match. Yeah.
He wasn't in that full-time status. So right now in 93 is where Perfect felt he was at his peak condition.
Do you know that shit was all because of the Warrior getting fired or quitting or whatever, and then the Ultimate Maniacs became the Perfect Maniacs?
Yeah, we already know that.
But do you know that WWE, Vince McMahon, paid back Lloyds of London because they paid out Kurt Hennig because they thought he was never wrestling again? And a year and a month later, in order for him to wrestle, because Bret Hart talks about it actually when he came in and did that match with Vince. If you ever watched the whole match, he never gets hit. He never takes a bump. They had to work it to where he never was the guy in peril. Otherwise, they would have had to pay back Lloyds of London because of his stroke. So that's how he did it, was he just never took a bump. But Kurt Hennig is a good guy here. That's a different dynamic right there. But what I love about it is he still wrestles heel. And he holds the ropes. He does everything like this is why he's Mr. Perfect. And the crowd actually appreciates it, right?
Well, remember the promo in King of the Ring 93 between the two and Mean Gene Okerlund, Bret Hart kind of took a little pot shot at him, kind of being like jokingly, but then Mr. Perfect was like, what? Hell no. In that kind of instance. And then they talked about my father could kick your father's ass and all that stuff. So you already had the makings of a good rivalry match. Some heat to bring into that match.
And you have the brass ring of being the King of the Ring. So it's amped up for that too. But here's something that they say in that match that I waited. You should be proud of me for showing some patience and some reserve.
The floor is
you said how these rivalries, usually it's boom, 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 and this one's spaced out. And you said the house shows don't ever make it to TV. In this match, they are talking about the fact that they only wrestled one other time. And we both know they wrestled way more than once. But they reference back to 1991 SummerSlam at this King of the Ring, saying these guys are familiar with each other, but they're at different points in their career now, and they were both baby faces. But they reference that like they'd only fought one time.
Well, Vince McMahon has this weird revisionist history, and he makes everybody say this kind of revisionist history. You and I know that didn't happen. You and I know that they fought hundreds of times in 1989 alone on the house show circuit because they have the timing, they have the coordination, all that stuff, and they have the chemistry to do what they did. And again, that's a great advantage for the house shows, for all the AEW marks out there. This is why house shows are still necessary. And this is why house shows are still necessary for WWE. If they've been wanting to do cutbacks, budget cuts. You don't get rid of the house shows. It's not meant for to blow the house down, TW. It's meant to have the chemistry between the two.
Testing the wise. Where Razor and Luger got teased to see who's going to be a good guy, and they both ended up being good guys because the crowd was split 50-50 on them. But I'll tell you this, AEW fans, I don't know if AEW even does house shows. I'm starting to wonder.
They've done a couple. They did a couple.
I got an email the other day. Tickets on sale for Chicago AEW. I'm like, what the fuck? Did they even leave? Are they still there? They went to Canada for a couple weeks, and now they're going right back to Chicago. But anyways, house shows, if you ask any guy on TV what his favorite show to wrestle on, they will tell you it's a house show because they have fun. If they want to bleed, they bleed. If they want to go over the guardrail, they can go over the guardrail. If they want to dive up about everything they can't do on TV because of sponsors, they can do. If they want to be funny all night and just do ribs, they do it. And people leave house shows satisfied. They leave going, wow, that was a different night. And it's cool because I think I told you before, the first house show I ever went to, it was so hard for me because there wasn't commentating. And now I'm just used to it, right? You go, like, even you go to Monday Night Raw or SmackDown or AEW live TV, you don't hear the commentators. So there's no commentator normally when you watch live wrestling. So if you go enough, you get used to not hearing them. But the live house show is absolute fun. And they usually come here in Detroit around Christmas time and do that holiday tour thing. I've never gone to one. I've always wanted to because I feel like that one would be even funner. They'd probably be giving shit to kids all night, like making their day and just giving them stuff. But house shows are absolutely necessary. It's how they grow people. It's how they grow characters, how they grow interests. Because if you went over each town, that's going to translate to TV when they come back and people remember you from the house show when you came before, when you necessarily weren't on TV as much.
And because we're saying this, Reflection Ice, in particular with this match in 1993 TW, you can see where they incorporated their house show stuff and 1991 and try to give you a twist to the 1993 King of the Ring where Bret Hart wins. Maybe people were expecting that he was going to do another sharpshooter on his back, turn him over and do the same thing, but we didn't get that same ending, TW. So if you want to explain to the
I'll let you do this one. I did the last one. You do this.
Well, again,
I also don't remember. So
that's good. But the beauty of it, right, TW, is remembering certain things. Remembering that
small
spot.
Package, wasn't it?
It was a small package.
Yeah.
It was a small package. Reflection. But when he was trying to do the sharpshooter, Mr. Perfect blocked it. Again, the little nuances, TW, I just wanted to point out. It's not about getting the correct thing. But with this 93 match, Reflection Ice, TW eloquently said Mr. Perfect was more heelish, even though he was the good guy. He had to be heelish because, again, he's the aggressor, and he has a chip on his shoulder, Reflection Ice, because Bret Hart beat him in 91. So, of course, you can understand the heat that he wants to put on Bret Hart. Right, TW? Let's put a ball on this.
He wants this win back.
Right.
And if I'm watching this live in 93, I'm absolutely thinking Mr. Perfect's winning, right? 100%. I was actually stunned because, history just ends up, it all feels like the same year. I thought Bret won the King of the Ring before he was world champion, which is probably the 91 one is why I'm thinking that. Okay. But I was like, what the fuck? He won the King of the Ring after he was world champion? So if you look at it logically, he has to win it. If he doesn't win it after he's been world champion and all three of the guys he wrestled never were, then he would look like he definitely went backwards in the hierarchy of the company because, I didn't even know that at the time. He's got to win it unless you get screwed. Like if someone screws him, then by all means, right? But at the end of this, Mr. Perfect looks like he's mad again, and it's another tip of the hat to that 91 match. He looks like he's going to ambush Bret after the match like he did in 91. Instead, he gets in his face and says, and then shakes his hand, pats him on the back, and walks out of the ring. So it restores him back to babyface. It shows respect, gives Bret the rub if he needs one still, and like, go get him, Tiger. Like, that's what the pat on the back is.
He didn't need the rub. He just needed the validation from Vince McMahon, and this gave him the validation. With that being said, let's move on to not the main event, but the last match in this Greatest Rivalries edition, TW. And we go to WCW. We go to WCW Uncensored from January of 1998, TW. And again,
by the way, real quick, forgot to mention this. The opening match for SummerSlam 91, where we had Stu, Helen, Gorilla, Piper.
No gatekeeper. No, I know the
opening match was Hercules and Roma with the Warlord versus Bulldog, Steamboat, and Kerry Von Erich. I did not know that match even happened until today. And 4 of those dudes are dead. Just said, add them to the list. Put them on the list. 3 of them.
Ladies and gentlemen, the gatekeeper, TW.
The Grim Reaper.
The Grim Reaper, TW. Okay. Now, with that being said, let's move on to the final match of this Greatest Rivalries edition. WCW Uncensored January 9th. What?
King of the Ring 93. Everyone Bret beat is dead. They're all dead. He's killing everyone.
Jesus Christ. Now you're calling Bret Hart the Grim Reaper. Oh, Jesus Christ.
King Midas, I don't know. He's ending it. He's doing it.
Oh, God. Can I go into the last match? Can I give the introduction to the last match? Okay, thank you very much. WCW Uncensored, January 1998. Now, this variable is way, way different on the hierarchy, TW, because, again, Bret Hart is coming in technically with all the momentum from getting screwed in Montreal. But, again, this is hindsight. We already know that Eric Bischoff didn't know what to do with him. They didn't give Bret Hart the chance to win the belt or whatever, all that stuff. They didn't get him to be the main event.
They took him just to take him. And,
right.
Who are you going to knock off the playbook that's already running hot? Right. You know.
Again, we're not going into the logistics of his bookings, but but he was supposed to be coming with all this momentum. Now he's supposed to be the guy to tip the scales with the WCW versus NWO war. He didn't even become that either because he joined the NWO. So that's, again, one of the stupid things that they did with Bret Hart. But neither here nor there. But in 1998, this was technically his first debut match, if you will, TW, because Starrcade was just the enforcer / referee. So this was his first match on a WCW card in 1998. This was his debut of WCW. And, of course, who better than to debut against than Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig, accompanied by Ravishing Rick Rude, both dead. I got you. Yes, they're both dead. But the ambiance of this match is lower because of the variables. Because, again, Mr. Perfect has nothing to lose. Again, this is WCW against NWO. So, again, you can have that kind of war, but it just didn't feel right. It just felt so off. Because, again, Bret Hart is coming with all this momentum. And Mr. Perfect, he's just collecting a paycheck because the schedule is easy. He's doing half the dates. Of course, his back is still killing him to a degree. So what say you? Because, again, the ambiance is not there, but we know the pedigree is there. The chemistry is there. The coordination is there. The two that could close their eyes and know the movesets. What say TW about this?
And you had Rick Rude in there, and I couldn't help but think about how Rick Rude is there because he told them "fuck you" because of what they did to Bret in Montreal. He told him I'm out, and then he went back to WCW. So he's there. He's pretty active in the match. Like, he gets physical in there. And the best thing about this is unlike the 1990 WrestleMania match getting absolutely shit on at Halloween Havoc when they had Hogan versus Warrior 2, you have Bret versus Kurt 3 for all practical reasons. And it's not that. That's one thing I do like. And obviously Bret has to go over. He can't lose in his first match there. The whole tale of the match is Bret has been turning down the overtures to join NWO. Kurt Hennig comes out representing the NWO because who wasn't? And then he gets in there and fights Bret. So this one is for not the legacy. It's for the dominance of the promotion. Like, we're sending our henchmen to get you since you won't join us, and then we're also sending Rick Rude with him.
Right. Again, it kind of feels lower than what it needs to be, because it could have been for the U.S. title. Yeah, no belt. It could have been for the U.S. title. It could have been for the TV title, but it wasn't for that.
You know what? If you have him win either one of those belts, even though it's not the world belt, if he wins it in his first match there, it's strap the rocket. Like, what else can he do, right? Like, didn't Goldberg win the U.S. title before the world title?
Mm-hmm.
So they basically warried him. They put the double title on him. So, but that's how you do it. Like you said it. You got to paint him up a little bit before you put the world title on him. You have him. I think TV title was sucked, but if you put the U.S. title on him straight away, and he did end up winning the U.S. title.
Yeah. But it's just a matter of fact by the time he wins it, because again, like you said, the rocket ship should have been put on Bret Hart immediately. First match. But again, there's a lot of hindsight, because I don't want to go backwards, because in Starrcade, Curt Hennig loses the U.S. title to DDP. He needs a rocket ship, so he needs that validation. Right. So I don't want to go into the variables on that. But that's a good what if. What if Mr. Perfect beats Diamond Dallas Page, holds that belt until WCW Uncensored, Bret Hart comes in. Now you got this Maverick coming from the WWF. If he beats him for the U.S. title, whoa! What say you about that what if right there? Because it could have the wrestling history could have
probably it alters the whole shit show that was Bret Hart there. Ask him. He regrets going there. He said it was the worst time of his career. It ended his career. Like, that guy, I don't agree with a lot of the fucking stuff CM Punk says, and I'm not mad at Goldberg. It wasn't his fault. He was green. He got too much too soon. But Bret getting that concussion doesn't happen. It doesn't happen if he doesn't go there, and he might still have been wrestling until 2010, legit, like Curt Hennig. I forget what year he died, 03, 04, 05, whatever.
03.
But he came back and was wrestling there. So Bret could have easily been still wrestling in 2003, 4, 5. It would have been Bret and Rock, Bret and Austin. Well, we had those, but I mean, that stuff.
It would have been Bret
and Bret Cena.
Bret and Shawn, Bret and Cena, Bret and Orton. Well, I get where you're going with that.
Yeah. It would have been good stuff, and all because Vince mortgaged his damn house to get him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's all WCW's fault. If they're not winning, then Bret doesn't have to get his contract bought out or resolved or whatever. But what I hate the most about it is.
Well, you're going with that variable about his health. I'm just going by the variable.
No. But I'm saying
if he was the U.S. champion, you could have changed the trajectory.
Right.
Of
he doesn't end up the heel.
Booking patterns.
He ends up becoming a heel because the crowd just gives up on him because they don't do anything with him. So he's not getting the same heat that he was getting, babyface heat, when he got there. So they had no choice but to turn him heel, right? Because he lost his momentum. But if you put the belt on him, the other thing that I hate about this, I'm never going to be mad about you giving me Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect ever, right? But first get one out the rip. He wins by submission. He also, survives, for the most part, a 2-on-1 from Rick Rude and Mr. Perfect, and then just is left laying. It makes Curt Hennig look like enhancement. It makes it look like the Saturday morning debut, and Bret Hart taps out Curt Hennig. And it's like, come on, man. You couldn't have made that Buff Bagwell. You couldn't. Why did it have to be Perfect? And by the way, just to answer your question, Perfect lost it to DDP in December. I don't even know what month this one is in, January or February? January. You could have had Perfect win that belt back from DDP with Rick Rude helping, and then next month have Bret versus him, because they had a regular match. It wasn't like the stupid uncensored rules where Blacktop Bully and shit like that. So you could have had him win the belt back almost the same way as he did it against Kerry. And then Bret beats him for that title and survives Rick Rude. It makes DDP look weak because he didn't survive the 2-on-1. But you can give him another, whatever. Matter of fact, you might not even ever have a DDP run if they did Bret better, because everyone got fucking hurt.
Right, and that's the biggest what if right there, Reflectionites. Again, we bring all the shows into this. We bring a what if into this because, again, that's a really good point there, TW, because, again, this match feels very insignificant. But again, the two did the best. But I'll have to say this: Mr. Perfect was a little bit slower. I think his timing was a little bit off by a half a second.
Didn't do the same bumps.
Didn't do the same. He couldn't do the same bumps.
All right.
Again, you understand why. You understand the injuries are creeping up on him. He can't take the same kind of punishment like he did maybe in 1993, in 1992, in 1991, and all that stuff. We understand the reasonings. But again, this match with a lot of let's say legacy in it just didn't feel right in WCW because they didn't know what to do with it. And of course, Bret Hart wins with the sharpshooter. And even the way he put it on him when they did the roll, like I think they did the sunset flip, and then if the timing was there for both guys, it just felt like, oh, I just got off. Then I put the thing on, and then, if they did it in the WWE with the house show circuit, they would have got that crisp. That's the way I would look at it. So, let's put a bow on this, TW. What caught your eye? Because again, 2 are dead already, and Bret Hart's still living. But what else caught your eye with the WCW uncensored? The commentary or just the match?
The commentary. I'm glad you reminded me because I almost forgot it. I actually was like, wow. Because I believe it was Tony Schiavone, Bobby Heenan, and then I can't remember who the third person was.
It would either be Mike Tenay or Dusty Rhodes, but I think it would be Mike Tenay.
It wasn't Dusty, so it was probably Tenay. Mm-hmm. And they referenced, of all things, that Mr. Perfect was the first person that Bret Hart won a singles title from that put him on his solo trajectory, that he was the first, and they mentioned Perfect was mad at him. He's like, how would you like to be the guy who Bret won his first singles titles from? He'd be mad too. And the same thing that Macho Man asked Bobby on King of the Ring, he said, oh yeah, when he beat him last time, were you managing him then? He was blaming Bobby that Perfect loss. He goes, no, I wasn't. And he did it again on that one. And so I thought that was a nice, I wish WWE did that more often. Every now and again, you'll hear, very rarely, you'll hear them reference someone won a Japanese title from somewhere in their career. I don't know if it's AJ, but you'll hear something like that, or a Mexican title. But you don't ever hear someone, they didn't flat out say Intercontinental title, but they said his first singles championship that set him on the path for his solo career. And I thought that was awesome. Absolutely awesome. That they would even say that, and no one said, you pal, there's no other belts than ours. I just thought it was cool.
Paying homage is good, but then you have to, there's rules. You can't say the name of the title, but you can at least say, but we all know.
And the people that know. And the people that don't, like, oh, let me look it up. And they have no idea where to look because he didn't say the name.
Right. That's the way, again, the reputation of a wrestling company, Reflection Nights, is they're the major leagues. But they have to get there. So you have to work your way to get to the major leagues. So you know that there's a backstory for any wrestler. There's titles for wrestlers to win to get to this point. It's like a resume, TW. So once they get to WCW, once they get to WWE, once they get to AEW, you have a resume with all the title wins that you've had, but you can't say the titles. With that being said.
Right.
But we close on this greatest Rivalries edition that was handpicked by TW. So, again, you turned me around saying it is greatest, but I still say that I'll put an asterisk on the word greatest rivalries because, again, I have my variables. I'm very subjective.
It's untapped potential. Let's bring another show in. It could have been so much more.
Untapped rivalries. Yes, we've just christened it. Thank you for watching the PWR Untapped Rivalries edition with Bret the Hitman Hart and Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig. So with that being said, TW, let's give out those socials so we can get out of
Right? Anyway, no.
He missed it. I was waiting for the tag. I was looking on my phone.
I know. He'll probably sign it now. I thought you'd started at 7:30. All right. So the Pro Wrestling Coalition sponsors us at the PWC Network at podbean.com, Hameen Media Group at podbean.com as well, and HMG can also be at channelattitude.com. Our Twitter handle is at PW Reflection. Big Ray, can't do it without him, at Big Ray Hernandez. He's also on Threads now, but every single social media platform, if there's a platform, he's on it, and you find him there at Big Ray Hernandez, including Threads. Mine, at Tommy Wonder 19, is my Instagram, which is also my Threads, and it's also my Not So Nice Guy Twitter. Snapchat's Number Wonder, Facebook.com/Tommy Wonder. At the Tommy Wonder is my TikTok and my Nice Guy Twitter. And then Big Vito in the Well can be found at bigvitobrand.wixsite.com. patreon.com/thebigvitobrand, and you can watch the early release of the Reflection video at twitch.tv/thebigvitobrand.
And again, Reflectionites, I think we might go episodic TW because I've been looking at this.
Are you not giving out your credentials?
I'm going to give out my credentials. I forgot to tell the Reflectionites what we're going to do on the next episode. So I think we're going to go episodic TW. We are going to delve into garbage. And what I mean is extreme, not Extreme Championship Wrestling TW. I'm talking about Extreme Pro Wrestling, the one that was run by porn director Rob Black. This garbage wrestling company needs to be talked about, needs to be like destroyed. And me and TW are going to destroy an XPW episode from the early 2000s. So look out for that the next week or so. So you can find me on my Twitter at PWSOPROF. That's PWSOPROF. You can find me on the threads at Chabello69_. Follow my brothers in arms. If this gets uploaded by 8-Track Brown, the dirtiest of the city, at the number 8 TRAC Brown on the PWSO YouTube networks. And of course, follow the host of the Wednesday Locker Room, Billy Ray Valentine, at Obi-Wan You Know Me. So with that being said, again, next week we're going to do the disintegration. We're going to destroy XPW, one of those episodic episodes. I got a lot to say about that organization. So it's going to be either... It's going to be
a gay porn director, so you're all in.
It's going to be a shoot, cowboy. It's going to be a shoot about this episodic episode. So with that being said, I'm the Professor. That's Mr. Wonderful, Dum Dum Do It Idiot Song, the Iron Stomach One, the Grim Reaper himself. Woo! Tommy One is saying good night, and we'll see you next week here at the PWR Podcast at Hami Media Group at podbeam.com. Peace!
Oh, yeah.
That's it? That's all you got? You wasn't going to say best there is, best there was, the best there will be?
I didn't have
You don't have a gum? You don't have a gum to slap?
Oh,